booked and then come take my hand. We're rebels with a paperback plan.
Welcome, listeners, to Booked and Banned, the podcast, where we discuss essential literature that has faced challenges and censorship. Today, we will discuss Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Wade, welcome to the show. Please tell our
Thank you.
listeners a little bit about who you are and what your connection is to literature.
Well, my name is Wade Wood. I live in Japan, where I've lived for the past 26 years. I have a fancy title for my job, Director of English Education, but basically I just teach kids. I got into literature very early on. I was very lucky in that both of my grandmothers had libraries in the home that were bigger than our little small Texas town community library. In fact, when my mom's mother died, we wanted to donate the books to the library. They couldn't take them because her private collection, they would have to have built an extension. So I started off really reading early on, great collection of books, good stuff. And both grandmothers, where if I had said, I want a toy, they would say no. But if I wanted to buy a book that was like 10 times the price of the toy, I got the book. And I went on to college, got a master's in history, got a master's in English, and I got all the way to ABD for my doctoral. And I just kind of went, I really don't want to spend another 20,000 because I was here and I was set. But I grew up with books and they've been a blessing in my life. They really have.
It's great. And I also lived in Japan once as an exchange student.
Well,
And
okay.
then when I was stationed on Okinawa with the Army, but that's not
Mm.
how you and I met. We actually were
No,
introduced by a mutual friend. Yeah. So we have that Japan connection, but that's not how we found each other.
no. Yeah.
So let's put the book in context.
Okay.
Published in 1969, Slaughterhouse-Five tells the story of Billy Pilgrim, a lanky, unassuming optometrist who has become unstuck in time. The novel follows Billy as he randomly drifts through different moments of his life: his childhood, his career in upstate New York, his abduction by toilet plunger-shaped aliens from the planet Tralfamador, and
I love it.
most pivotally, his experience as an American prisoner of war during World War II. The heart of the book is the firebombing of Dresden. Like Vonnegut himself, Billy survives the horrific destruction of the city by hiding in an underground meat locker, the Slaughterhouse-Five of the title. To process this trauma, Billy adopts the philosophy of his alien captors, that time is not a linear string of events, but a collection of moments that all exist simultaneously. It is a darkly funny, deeply moving anti-war classic that explores post-traumatic stress, the illusion of free will, and the human need for stories to help us survive the unthinkable. Just a note, I use the term PTS, or post-traumatic stress, without the disorder, because post-traumatic stress seems like a normal reaction to trauma. I don't think of it as a diagnosis, I guess. Despite being a staple of American literature, Slaughterhouse-Five is one of the most frequently banned books in modern history. Since its release, it has been challenged at least 18 times for reasons ranging from, quote, vulgar language, unquote, to being, quote, anti-Christian, unquote. Vonnegut was an atheist and he was a skeptic of organized religion, and also for, quote, being unpatriotic, unquote. There are some key moments in its banning. In 1973, in North Dakota, a school board didn't just ban the book, they burned 32 copies in the school's furnace. This prompted a famous, stinging letter from Vonnegut to the school board, in which he wrote, quote, "If you were to bother to read my books, you would learn that they are not sexy and do not argue in favor of wildness of any kind. They beg that people be kinder and more responsible than they often are." Unquote. In 1982, the book was part of the landmark case Island Tree School District versus Pico. The Supreme Court eventually ruled that school boards cannot remove books from libraries simply because they dislike the ideas within them. Sounds like a precedent that we should be employing today. But the battle continues. In 2011, Slaughterhouse-Five was banned in Missouri after a local professor called it shocking material. Most recently, as of January 2026, the Vonnegut estate has joined a federal lawsuit against the state of Utah, challenging new, quote, sensitive materials, unquote, laws that have once again removed the book from school shelves. The irony of banning Slaughterhouse-Five is rarely lost on careful readers. A book written by a man who survived Nazi Germany as a POW is frequently targeted by the very type of censorship he warned against. Imagine surviving one of the deadliest firebombings in human history by hiding in a meat locker, only to come home and tell everyone you've been abducted by creatures from the planet Tralfamador. So here we are. Wade, please tell us why you chose Slaughterhouse-Five and this story. Why is it special to you?
Well, this is a book that really touched me. And you hear people say things like, this book saved my life. This book changed my life. This book literally did that for me. When I was 11 years old, my father died, and it really, really hurt me. I was suicidal. I literally got a gun out one time. And then one day I was in the bookstore and I saw this book and I went, Vonnegut. Okay, that's what the name is. And it had this funny title, Slaughterhouse-Five. I had no idea what it was about. It was in the science fiction section, and science fiction at the time was my escapism. And I just went, well, I'll give this a try because I read the blurb as you just basically rounded up what the book's about. And I'm going, this sounds nuts. This could be fun. And then I got to the part where the aliens explained to the main character, this is how we view time. It's not a linear thing. It's all moments are fluid. All moments are together. And that when we see someone who has passed away, we're not sad because in that moment they're bad. But in all the other moments, they all exist all at once. And for the 12-year-old me, it was an eye-opening awakening that I lost my father. But as long as he was in my memory, as long as I could remember those other moments, he was still with me. And he still is to this day. And I've lost my grandparents on both sides since then. And they were very, very close to me. After my dad died, they all kind of brought me in as their youngest son, not their oldest grandson. And when I'm on a mountaintop, I'm with my grandfather and we're in nature together still. I'm not a big baseball fan, but I watch the Atlanta Braves play baseball because that's what I used to do with my papa and granny. And they're here with me. And it's a way that I can just let all the stress of my life go. And it really has affected me that much in my life. This wonderful, insane book. And it is an insane book. I tried to explain it to a friend of mine tonight at dinner. He's English and he had never read it before. And I'm trying to explain what the book's about. And he's like looking at me going, what? And you have to love that there's this book that for some strange reason people want to ban that touches people the way this book touched me. And there's so many books that are banned that it really makes a difference in people's life.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and may your grandparents and your father's memory be a blessing.
Well,
It sounds like
it
they
really
are.
is.
Yeah.
And like I said, thanks to this book, thanks to this strange concept that my 12-year-old brain had never thought of before, they're here with me to this day, thanks to this one book.
Oh, that's just amazing.
Yeah.
So there's a clear parallel between Billy's traumatic experience as a POW and his supposed abduction by the Tralfamadorians.
Hmm.
He claims that he became unstuck in time in 1944 when he's exhausted and trying to escape being picked up by Germans or Nazis. He checks himself into a veterans hospital in 1948 to deal with his PTS, where he first encounters the novels of Kilgore Trout. What a name. Considering Billy becomes a fan of this terrible and unsuccessful science fiction writer, do you think Billy is actually traveling through time? Or is he mentally projecting himself into a fictional Kilgore Trout style universe to survive or deal with his trauma?
This is something that I've totally changed on because, as I was mentioning to you before we started, when I first read the book at 12, and then I read it again in high school at around 16, and now I'm an old man of 56, and I read it at 12, 16, and at 56. And this one question I've totally changed on, in that when I read it the first time, I loved the idea of the aliens. I loved that they could come and give him the wisdom to see things and change his life and view things differently. And now, reading it this time, I really think it's probably more PTS, dealing with the stress and the strain of his life. And I think that comes from because I've been in combat situations myself after I read the book in my youth. And I've been in Bosnia during the war there and saw atrocities personally and visited places like the killing fields in Cambodia, Auschwitz. And that's another thing I think this book did. It made me curious about things like Dresden. I've always been a history person, from my grandfather telling me war stories from World War II, my bedtime stories. And I had a uncle who was a professor of history, and they brought it alive for me. But this book kind of gave me a little bit of a tangent to the side of the more horrific events in history. Being here in Japan, I've been to Hiroshima, I've been to Nagasaki, and I really think his vision of the aliens and all of this, I think maybe it was more an escape from the tragic things in his life. And again, that's totally different from when I read it as a child and then as a teenager. Interesting how books change for us.
Well, and we're a different person coming to read the book, right? And so
Exactly.
it may be the same book, but we take a different message from it each time we read
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, that's one of the great strengths of literature, is that we're a different
Yeah.
person and it becomes a different book.
Well, in little things, because every time he mentions being the optometrist, I had not read The Great Gatsby when I first read it. But after reading The Great Gatsby, every time he mentions being an optometrist, I think of the big sign with the glasses that's in the book, The Great Gatsby. And it's just kind of cracks me up to a certain degree. It's little things like that that just aging makes a book change and become alive in a different way.
Absolutely. So, whenever Billy encounters death, whether
Mm,
it's a single person or even an entire city or a tangential event, he responds with the novel's famous fatalistic refrain,
mm.
"So it goes." Does this phrase represent a peaceful acceptance of life cycles, or is it a sign of emotional numbness and a lack of empathy, or neither? What are your thoughts about that?
The optimist in me wants to say it's an acceptance of life cycles, that he's saying it more so it goes. And then part of me kind of goes, well, maybe not. But the optimist in me wants to believe that it's just recognizing that death is a part of life. And it doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean a lack of empathy. It can also mean I recognize the goodness in that life is a cycle. And what would be the point of life if it was infinite? And to me, that devalues it.
Yeah, it actually sounds kind of boring,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Losing my father so young and losing my grandparents in my 20s, I would not have gone to Bosnia to make documentary films if they had lived. I wouldn't have been as reckless with myself because I realize you only have one shot at this. The old life is but a stage, and you have that one shot at it. And I would not be in Japan today. I would, be living in a small Texas farm community. You have to get out there and experience things. And I think that's really more of what So It Goes means. It's recognizing that things are not eternal, that things can be a constant and it can be a fluid thing, but there's only so much fluid that can go into the glass.
That's great. Vonnegut describes this book as
Mm,
short and jumbled and jangled
mm,
because, quote, there is nothing intelligent to say about a massacre, end quote. And Vonnegut ends the novel in his own voice, recounting his own visit to Dresden. Well, he bookends the novel So it's at the beginning and at the end,
Yeah.
recounting
Yeah.
his own visit to Dresden with another former POW and occasionally breaks into the narrative throughout the book. Billy jumps back and forth in time, but also claims to have been kidnapped by aliens and taken to Tralfamador during his daughter's wedding reception, 20 years after World War II. He
Mm.
doesn't reveal his alien abduction until he is also the survivor of a plane crash and hospitalized with a skull fracture. And then his wife, whom he's not really that attached to, but she dies on her way to the hospital. It's a lot. What do
Mm.
you think about the nonlinear, fragmented structure of the book? Is it more effective at conveying the reality of war than a traditional chronological story would be?
Yes, I actually think it is. And when I first read it, it was one of the first times I read a novel that presented the narrative this way, where it was jumping around, moving back and forth. It's become so much Pulp Fiction, all these other movies where that happens. You get used to it now, but the first time you read it, it really is kind of like, okay, let me go back here. What was he saying here? But with war, I don't have a lot of experience, but I've been shot at and I've been in combat. And for me personally, at that moment, it wasn't a linear thing. It was, oh my God, what the heck's going on? Things are so nuts. And I think it really does present it in a way that's more realistic than just, I did this and then I did this. It helps convey the confusion of certain things where one second you're here and the next second you're there and you're not real sure how you got from one place to the other. And I like the way that that works. And plus, I think it's something that as it's becoming more common, people can relate to it more now than they could when it was published, maybe.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I do
Yeah.
think there are a lot more narratives now that jump back and forth in time
Yeah.
or have different timelines running simultaneously
Yeah.
in the book. I also think, well, it seems to me that Billy in the plane crash,
Mm.
that just dredged up all the
Yeah.
previous trauma that he'd sort
Yeah.
of suppressed.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the Veterans Hospital, but it goes back to being a
Yeah.
POW. And it all gets mashed up with these novels by Kilgore Trout and his alien abductions. And I mean, it is a masterpiece, and I love
Oh,
the
yes,
way
it
that
is.
Vonnegut handles it.
Yeah.
And in a way, it
Yeah.
gives you these little Easter eggs, right? With the
Well, and
jumping back
it
and
really
forth in
does.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it presents the story in such a way that you can feel his confusion about some of the things that are going on because you're going, what's going on? And Vonnegut is just so hilarious. With the one sentence, you're sitting there giggling. And it's so wonderful going back to the first time I read it. I hadn't laughed a lot that year. And I think this was the first time I started getting the giggles since my father's death, reading this book. And if that's not a gift, nothing is.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. When I was at West Point, the philosophers did a lot of just war theory. That was part of the
Yeah.
curriculum there. And every year, one or two of the philosophy professors would take a group of cadets on
Hmm.
a summer trip, usually a couple weeks, but they would go to Dresden
Yeah.
and put that in the framework of just war theory and
Mm, mm,
whether
mm.
we were justified in bombing that city or not.
Right.
So I think it's still a question that's out there today, whether it
Yeah.
was a war crime, the effects that it had on even POWs who were caught in the crossfire, as it were.
One of the more interesting things that I've had happen in my lifetime is when I moved to Japan as an English teacher. I wasn't teaching at a school, I was teaching at a conversation school. And it turned out one of my students started booking me for private lessons because he was a history professor and he wanted to discuss history in English. And it was rather interesting. He was probably my age 26 years ago and probably a little bit older, but he was the son of a veteran of the Imperial Air Force from World War II. His father was literally a kamikaze pilot. And my grandfather on my mom's side was a glider pilot and was in North Africa, Sicily, Italy. His squadron was held back under the orders of Eisenhower directly from the invasion of Normandy because they were the most combat experienced squad they had. And he wanted people that had combat experience to train the replacements if it failed. And that's the reason he didn't go in the Normandy. And we would sit there and we would talk about history and talk about these things. It really is nice to be able to communicate on that level. There are evil, evil people that must be defeated and we must fight them. But in the end, no war is just. It just has to be done. But in a sense of justice, it doesn't exist, I don't think.
I think the way that you find justice is that your side is trying to conduct yours justly or in a
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
manner. That's kind of the best that we can hope for because of all the collateral damage to
Yeah.
civilians.
Was it Cortez that wrote Waiting for the Barbarians?
I
Have you
don't
read that?
know. I have not.
You should read Waiting for the Barbarians. It won the Nobel Prize for Literature, but it's basically an outpost of an unnamed country. The barbarians are coming. And as they prepare for the barbarians, they become barbarians themselves. So to defeat the enemy, they became the enemy, and the enemy never came. And I think that's something nobody goes to a war going, I'm going to destroy everything. The soldiers who went to Vietnam did not say, I'm going to go to My Lai. That's what I want to do with this war experience. And it's tragic. As a history person, it just blows my mind that people can actually go, this is a good war. No, well, it's a better war than other wars, but no war where people die is a good war. But yeah, that's just me.
I think I'm right there too. And I was going
Yeah.
to say, so my father and
Mm,
my father's deceased, my father-in-law,
yeah.
they were about the same age and both of them were much older than my mother
Yeah.
and my husband's mother. So we were kind of late in life children for them.
Mm,
So both of
mm,
them were in World War II. My father was in the Pacific. So my husband's family is Japanese American
mm.
and his dad was in the 2nd Infantry Battalion,
Okay.
which is the most decorated combat
Yeah.
unit in Army history. And they were in the European theater. It's the
Okay.
Japanese
Okay.
segregated battalion. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Inouye was in it. Yeah.
yes. Yeah,
Why?
exactly.
Yeah.
And my
Oh
husband
yeah. Yeah.
actually
Okay.
heard him speak at an
Yeah.
anniversary dinner they
Oh.
did probably about 15 years ago now. It was amazing. But on the flip side of that, though, my
Mm,
deceased mother-in-law, she was still in Japan. She immigrated to the
right.
United States after World War II, quite a
Hmm.
bit after, but she was a, 12-year-old girl during World War II,
Wow.
pressed into service packing parachutes for the
Mm,
Japanese military. We in the United States in our generation have not experienced the total war
that.
phenomenon
Yeah.
that happened in the United States, that happened in Europe, it happened in
Yeah.
Japan during World War II. I don't think we can completely understand the totality of that,
Yeah.
the way that we've experienced war, even you and I who have been in combat zones ourselves.
Yeah. It
It's
was
not the
nothing
same.
compared to what they went through. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing.
it's just not the same.
The Dresden thing. I mean, we couldn't even comprehend an event like that happening now. With thank goodness for the news, one missile goes off course and hits a building it's not supposed to, and we know about it and we're outraged about it. We're talking about an entire city burning to the ground. It happened with the firebombing of Tokyo. Most people don't realize the firebombing of Tokyo, more people died there than Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined.
Yes.
You read about this character in Slaughterhouse-Five, and you can understand how he would want to escape. And this being an escape mechanism for him, you realize how it could be because the human brain can only take so much. It really can't go beyond a certain point.
Right.
And I think we've both known people who did suffer from post-traumatics and totally understandable. Totally understandable.
Yes. And Vonnegut famously said that writing an anti-war book is as effective as writing an anti-glacier book. He's implying that war is inevitable.
Mm,
And Vonnegut was also a lifelong pacifist, perhaps because of his
mm,
experiences in Dresden and as a POW, rather than in spite of them. Do you
mm.
feel, though, that the book is cynical about human nature, or is there a hidden thread of hope in Billy's story?
I think there's a hidden thread of hope. But I don't think it's cynicism. I think it's realism. I think it's just accepting. So it goes. This is going to happen. I remember reading The Guns of August back in high school and just going, what were these people thinking? We did not have to fight World War I. What were they doing? And yet, to this day, more casualties in World War II, but per day, 1,100 people died. It's the most deadly war in the history of the world. And it was fought because rulers who were basically cousins through Queen Victoria couldn't sit down and go, whoa, let's stop this. And there are so many little wars like that where it's just, oh, it goes. You can't help it. It's part of our nature. And that's not being a cynic. It's just recognizing the reality of it all, sadly.
So, what is the final legacy or message that you want our listeners to take away from reading this book?
Well, that books can make you a better person. This book made me a better person. Not necessarily just this book, but every book. Find that book that changes you. In later years, reading Somerset Maugham's The Razor's Edge, I wanted to be Larry Darrell. I wanted to be that person that went out and explored the world and escaped the humdrum life. And I did. I mean, here I am in Japan since I was 25. So, oh my gosh, 31 years now. I've lived overseas, exploring the world, doing different things. Don't ban books. Embrace them. Embrace the possibility of the imagination. We have to do that. Real quick. When I was in first grade, we had the book fair, and it was one of those things where we got to go into the cafeteria, and they had all these books, and you could pick up one book and take it home. And I picked the novelization of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I was 6 years old, and I had seen the movie, and I loved the movie, and it was great. And then my first grade teacher saw the book that I picked, and she took it away from me because she was going, this is too adult for you. This is things that aren't true. You don't need to read this. And I went home and I was angry, and I told my dad, and my dad went up there. Basically, all he did was pick up my lunchbox and said, have you noticed what his lunchbox is? And it was the Close Encounters lunchbox. And I was blessed by that. I had family members who never said, you're too young to read that, or you shouldn't read that. I personally, I'm an atheist, and I have been all my life. I've never been able to believe. And my grandmother, who was very Christian, and instead of attacking me for it or trying to shame me into the church, she gave me religious texts from religions all over the world. And when she gave me some books by Lao Tzu, and I read them, I opened it up, and she had highlighted the only thing she ever highlighted in all those books. It was, having someone love you deeply gives you strength. Loving someone deeply gives you courage. And this was also in my mid-teens as I'm becoming who I am. And it made a lot of difference to me. And when she died, I got my one and only tattoo. And it's the kanji, the Chinese characters for strength and courage, because she was my strength and she was my courage. And I got that from a book. That's the reason I love your podcast. And I think it's important that we get out there. We're living in scary times right now. Newspeak, from 1984, Orwell would have gone, what's happening in America now couldn't be possible. We need to have educated children who grow up to be thoughtful, caring, educated people who then pass that on to their children. And we just don't have it right now.
That is a beautiful, beautiful story. And I thank you for sharing all of
Thank you.
that and for your insights about Slaughterhouse-Five and about so many other things, because I feel like our conversation was a little wide ranging, but that's okay.
Ramble.
Nah, it's fine. So the next book will be The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. And as always, I will close us out by quoting Isaac Asimov. Any book worth banning is a book worth reading. Thank you.
Booked and banned and bound by pages, stories hiding through the ages, whispered truths that still ring clear for those who choose to listen here.